All right, hello and welcome. This is Module 3 of the Copywriting Mentorship Program, and today we are going to talk about the 25 by 4 rule that applies to all direct response marketing and, in most cases, all marketing in general. So this is a concept that you can apply to any of the projects that you work on as a copywriter or as a business. It gives you a framework to understand the bigger picture when it comes to marketing. And by understanding that bigger picture, it's going to allow you to both provide more value as a copywriter to your clients or to get more sales and grow your business faster as a business owner. Because understanding this sets you up for success in the future because you know every little piece that you need to have in order to grow a successful business or create a successful marketing campaign. So let's dive right in. First off, I want to discuss the history of the 25 by 4 concept because it originally started as the 40-40-20 concept. If you've been in direct marketing for any number of years, basically before the internet, anytime before the internet was invented, then you probably recognize the 40-40-20 rule. And I'm going to explain what this is. But we're going to go back into history. We're going to dig down deep and figure out why the 40-40-20 rule was so important and how it's changed now with the era of technology and the internet and instant communication. So without further ado, let's talk about what it used to be. So 40-40-20 are ratios. They all add up to be 100% of the marketing plan. And what those numbers represent are the amount of attention and effort you should put into each component of the marketing plan. The first component of that marketing plan is your list. And back in the day, before the internet was invented, the list accounted for 40% of what you needed to target in order to succeed in a direct mail marketing campaign. The reason for that was because it mattered so much what type of list that you picked that if you didn't get this part right, it was very, very likely that your product or service would fail. No amount of good copy could beat a bad list, and you could have the best offer in the world, but it could not beat a bad list. So let's talk about how lists were originally created because it's going to be relevant for you when we talk about the 25 by 4 rule because things have only expanded. They haven't changed completely. So let's talk about this. First off, the 40% list rule applied mostly in the direct mail order days. So the direct mail order days were the days where you could mail out to 50,000, 100,000, 1 million, 5 million, 100 million different names in the United States of America and across the world and expect to earn a specific ROI for your products. And most publishing companies, including major magazines and newspapers that you see today, like Time Magazine and The New Yorker and Reader's Digest, to just name a tiny fraction, were built during the direct mail days. And they understood that the importance of the list was basically untrumpable. You needed to focus on the list in order to succeed. And when you did that, you focused on many different segments of the list. I'm not going to go into every little piece because list design and list selection is an entire thesis unto itself. But what we're going to talk about here is why it's relevant and why it's relevant now today. So one of the big things that you did when you were trying to send direct mail was you would focus on simple segmentation like zip codes. Now, a zip code by itself is just a number. But what the zip code represents is a very specific, very insulated demographic of people that you can count on to be a certain way. So if you're marketing to 90210, probably the most famous zip code in all of America, which is Beverly Hills, you know that the type of person who's living in 90210 is going to react and do things in a very similar way to one another. And so you can plan your marketing and you can plan your offer accordingly. Now, why is that relevant? Why do you need to know zip codes? Why would you have to do that kind of research? Because the same concept applies today with not just zip codes, but everything about where people live in their digital and physical worlds. We're more mobile as a society now, and we're more fragmented as a society so that we're not specifically rooted in our communities. But make no mistake, we have our digital zip codes that we hang out in. And if you figure out the types of person who hangs out in a specific type of community on the internet, then using that information to target your offers and to create your lists from is going to make your marketing far, far more successful. Another way that people targeted was by recent buyers of similar products. Now, nowadays, there is so much information around, so much list building, so many pieces of information you can go out and buy or you can trade for, you can figure out, that it's almost overwhelming. So one of the things that you can take away from the history of the 40-40-20 rule that is now in the 25x4 rule is that there are specific things that highly leveraged your time and highly leveraged your success. Zip codes are one of them, knowing exactly who the kind of person is that you're targeting in a specific area. The next one is the recent buyers of similar products and the timescales at which they bought. So the recent buyers of similar products back in the day was when people were marketed to for specific products, and then the list owners that were created from those products would end up trading or selling the information from their list to other publishers because they knew that in addition to an additional source of revenue, that it would help the entire industry as a whole. Think of it as, a JV before you had to trade email swaps back and forth to market your products. In this case, if a publisher had a list of buyers that had bought something within the last 30 or 90 or 365 days, they would have those lists pre-segmented because they knew how powerful they were to other publishers. Think about it. If you were a publisher of a fitness magazine and you got a hold of a list of people who had subscribed to Muscle and Fitness in the last 30 days, how likely would it be that they would be interested in fitness offers? The idea is it would be very likely, and you saw a huge correlation between the recency of buying something similar and the interest in buying something that you are selling in that same market. Now, how do you apply that today? The recent buyers of similar products are all over the place. Some lists will allow you to get on there and borrow their lists or trade their lists, or you can find ways to market to recent buyers of similar products. But another way to do it is to simply use the information you have at hand. Google now is essentially ubiquitous, and you can bet that they have a ton of information of products that have been bought recently. Facebook buys data from 3 of the biggest data aggregators in the country and in the world just so you can have access to the ability to target people who have recently bought similar products to what you're selling. Don't take this for granted as a copywriter, because if you can put your offer in front of someone who's been proven to be a buyer of the thing you are selling, you're going to have a much better chance of success than if you go to a purely cold audience that is focused just on the demographic and psychographic research that you know you have to do. So focus on this. So let's talk about the next point: phone, advertorial, TV, and print. So 40% of the list when you are going to market things, like I said, originally focused on direct mail and direct mail lists. However, the same principle applied to phone sales, advertorials written in major publications, TV advertisement, and print advertisement in magazines and newspapers and things like that. Why? Because their quote-unquote list was the audience that they were cultivating by putting their advertisement out in a specific medium. It's the same reason why certain products advertise on certain TV channels or during certain time segments. It's the same reason why you see different ads in Cosmopolitan than you do in Muscle and Fitness, because they're advertising to different people. It's the same reason you see advertorials written for one audience in one newspaper, and then they change the topic of the advertorial when it moves into, say, a medical journal, or when it moves into a periodical for that particular industry. You have to know who you are marketing to, and the list is the best way to guarantee that you're actually talking to the target market that you've done all this research for. So make sure that you're focusing on the medium that you are delivering your stuff to. Now, all of these things combined, direct mail, the zip code idea, the recent buyers of similar products idea, and the idea of placing your advertising in the right place in front of the right people are all examples of hyper-segmentation. Hyper-segmentation is the idea that you can take a list and specifically choose who you want to market to based on predetermined factors that you think are important. That is hyper-segmentation. Do not settle for poor segmentation and do not settle for poor list choice. That is what the 40% list rule tells us when we historically look at the 40-40-20 rule. Let's move on. The second 40% is the offer. Now, the reason this was important historically was because you only got one shot. It was very, very expensive to sell things through direct mail. Once you got done with the shipping and handling, once you got done with the specific list buying, figuring out targeting, paying your employees, and then getting the copy and the creative and everything else handled, most of the time, even just for a test, you were out $10,000 to $50,000. So you had to get it right. There wasn't any option to go into your ClickFunnels and tweak a headline once you mailed out 1,000 letters. You were done. Once that test went out, you were done and you had to wait. And so therefore the offer, the thing that you were sending those people, was far more important to nail down right every single time. And on top of that, you had to use everything at your disposal, everything you could possibly do in order to try to convert the prospect you were marketing to. Which means you couldn't choose to just have a weak call to action. You couldn't choose to only answer a few of the objections. The reason you see so much wonderful long copy from back in the day before the internet was because they had to put it out there. They didn't want to run the risk of missing an objection that the prospect had and thus missing out on the sale. Because when you're sending it out to 10,000 or 100,000 people or 1,000,000 people, you can't afford to let the small percentages of people who would buy your product but didn't because of that objection, you couldn't let them through. It would be the difference between your campaign being profitable and your campaign being a bankrupt causing problem for your company. Now, think about this in terms of your copy. Today, in the technological world, we have the benefit of being able to take down a video that's not converting immediately and change it. We have the benefit of going in and live tweaking the headline of a sales page that is currently receiving traffic. We have the ability to go in and tweak our Google ads at any second. We have the ability to adjust our bids. So if on Facebook, you go in and say, I want to spend $100 today, but something's not converting, you can take it down to $5 a day. Back in the day, you couldn't do that. Once you'd spent your money, it was gone. There was nothing you could do to get it back, and you had to be absolutely sure that you were doing everything you possibly could to make it work. You had to have the irresistible offer. Now, the irresistible offer is another thing that we can go over in another piece of training. If I get enough interest from this video, we'll talk about the irresistible offer. All right, so the 20% from the old 40-40-20 rule was finally when you got to the copy and creative component. Because once you got here, you've selected your list, you've selected your offer, and made sure that was as strong as humanly possible. Now you get to the point where the rubber meets the road and you actually have to get the copy written and the creative written. So back in the day, they had three main objectives: get it delivered, get it opened, and get it read. So the first one was get it delivered. Make sure that it arrives in the person's mailbox. You'd be surprised at how hard that was to do, because a mailman who sees something that he perceives as junk mail is probably not going to take as much care of that piece of mail as he would a letter to someone, or as he would something that looks like it's from a bank or from something like that. Getting it delivered is still a very important part of copywriting, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The second part is getting it opened. Once it's in the mailbox and the person takes it out of their mailbox, they're sorting their trash over the, they're sorting their mail over the trash. And in order to get it opened, you had to have a very specific way of looking at it. You had to have a very specific tone to the piece. And you had to know what you were going for when that person picked up that piece of mail and decided whether or not they were going to dump it in the trash or open it up and see what it had to say. And the third one, obviously, was get it read. Once they opened the piece of mail, were they going to read it? And would they read the whole thing? Because if they read the whole thing, there was a high chance that they were going to buy. So get it delivered, get it open, and get it read was the main component of 20% copy and creative. Now, the other part of this was interruptive marketing was easier to ignore. Whether it was TV or print or radio, anything like that, it was easier to ignore the advertising that was out there than it is to do today, which means that you had to be actually more grabbing in your advertising, more interesting than you have to be today. Because right now we have pop-ups, we have banner advertising, we have unskippable ads in front of YouTube, we have ads embedded into our newsfeed on Facebook. We have Twitter ads embedded into our newsfeed on Twitter. Everywhere you look, I mean, even before movies in the movie theater, advertising is ubiquitous. It is almost impossible to ignore advertising. But back in the day, interruptive style advertising was easier to ignore. There just wasn't as much of it, and there wasn't as many places to find it, which meant that the copy had to be better so that you would actually read it and end up buying the product that they wanted you to buy. So think about that. 40% list, 40% offer, and 20% copy and creative. If you're trying to be a copywriter, those odds aren't great until you realize your job as a copywriter is all 100% of it. You have to help them with list selection. You have to help them with offer creation. And then you get down to the fun stuff of writing the actual copy. That is how you become a valuable copywriting consultant and not someone who just takes an order and gets something done. Because your copy is not the most important part of the piece, and it only gets worse. So let's talk about what it's like nowadays with the modern version of 40-40-20, which I call, and other people call, obviously, this is not just my theory, the 25x4 rule. 25-25, 25-25. Let's talk about it and show you what it means. By the way, this concept I first heard from Brian Kurtz. He was the one of the CEOs the senior vice presidents at Boardroom Incorporated, which was a multi-million-dollar publisher for decades. He knows direct mail, he knows direct response marketing, and he said that this 25-25, 25-25 rule is the way the future is going. And I am extrapolating via my experience as a copywriter because I can absolutely say it is true and then some. So let's talk about it. The first 25% is the list. Now let's talk about the different types of lists that you can end up working with as a copywriter. The first one is email lists. Obviously, there are different types of email lists, and email lists are actually one of the easiest things to work with in terms of lists. It's not like a mailing list where you have to spend $50,000 to send an email or to send a mailer to your entire list. In this case, you hit a button and you pay some hosting fees. It's not that bad. So there's a couple different types of email lists. If you're working with a client, that client most likely owns an email list. They have a certain number of subscribers that are sitting in their autoresponder. They may or may not have those people segmented based on any number of things. Usually they don't have them segmented enough, so it's hard for you to specifically pick who are the best buyers, who are the most engaged, who opens everything, who opens nothing, that sort of thing. That is something you can bring to the table if you know how to help them segment their audience like that. So keep that in mind. The second component to email lists is list drops or solo ads. Basically, you buy a spot in a person's email list and pay that person to send your message to their list. It's not technically buying their entire list, which I'll talk about in a second. Instead, it's paying them for them to send a sponsored promotion on your behalf. And there are people who own lists in various markets that do this. However, they are becoming less effective because the nature of the market is that when people create a list simply to sell positions in that list to other marketers, the list quality inherently goes down because it's a churn and burn style market. Now, when I say don't buy entire lists, I say that not because it's a bad idea, not because it's not converting. I say it because it's illegal. In most countries, you are not allowed to buy an email list and start sending emails to it. They have to voluntarily opt in to your email list. In Canada, and in other countries that are adopting this as well, you actually have to double opt in to the email list. It can't just be one thing. They have to hit confirm on the first email before you are legally allowed to send them emails. Here's why this matters. Many marketers have either paid millions of dollars in fines or potentially gone to jail. Some of them have gone to jail because they did not adhere to the do not buy lists who aren't voluntary rule. So keep that in mind. If you get a client who says, yeah, I just bought this list and I'm going to market to it, do not get that client or tell the client that it is a bad idea to do. All right, second type of list that you can have here. Pay-per-click, or in some ways, pay-per-view, which we'll talk about in a second. Pay-per-click advertising is essentially anything on the internet where you are paying a network or a platform to put an advertisement on that platform in exchange for paying for people clicking it. That's what you're doing. This can happen everywhere. You see it all over the web using Google display advertising, you see it all over Facebook, you see it all over Twitter. Pay-per-click is pretty ubiquitous. It's how many platforms, including Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, a lot of these places have grown their revenue because pay-per-click is one of the easiest ways to generate revenue if you own a platform. You see a lot of current systems moving to it, like Pinterest and like Snapchat will eventually do it as well. Lots of software services move to a pay-per-click model. It's accelerated. You can put ads up and have them seen by people that day, that hour. It's interruptive. It is in their newsfeed. It is in their social sphere. It's in their face. It's on their web browser. It's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Like I said, it's absolutely everywhere. And you can put it in places similar to the way you could put print advertising back in the day in magazines. You want to show up on Forbes? Buy an ad on Forbes. You want to show up on Men's Fitness? Buy an ad on mensfitness.com. So PPC is one of the most effective ways to get your advertising message in front of people. However, it's costly, and a lot of people do it wrong because there are some mechanics behind it and some technology behind it. So be aware that if you're working with a client who wants to use PPC, make sure they know what they're doing, because if they send the wrong people or if they spend too much, then no matter how good your copy converts, it's not going to dig them out of the hole that they put themselves in using PPC. All right, the third one is TV, YouTube, different media channels, and pay-per-view. So pay-per-view not meaning the things that you buy off the back of your cable, but pay-per-view as in the equivalent of pay-per-click, but with a visual media platform. You see YouTube do this with their pre-roll ads. If someone watches a certain segment of that ad, then they are getting charged by YouTube in exchange for that view. TV does a very similar model where you pay for a certain amount of airtime based on the number of people who are typically watching at that time. It's not quite as specific and trackable as YouTube, but it's very similar in the way of marketing, because you know that a certain type of audience is watching a certain type of show at a certain time, and you can bet that there will be a certain number of those people at those given times. So when you're using this type of media channel, then you have to be aware that your message is being consumed by a certain type of target market at a certain type of time. And if you're not aware of those specifics, you'll probably fail. So if you're offering something that should be on late night, but it's in the morning, and you're marketing to the wrong audience, then it's not going to succeed. If you are marketing a survival pack, but you're marketing it on beauty channel blogs on YouTube, it's not going to work. So you have to know what media you're targeting. Now, it seems simple, but I've seen many people waste thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, sending their advertisements to the wrong keywords, the wrong videos, and the wrong websites. So if your client is doing that and you can help them fix it, then you suddenly become their savior by doing it. So Let's talk about direct mail. Direct mail did not go away. Direct mail is still very much alive, and it's very underused at this point. Becoming a direct mail expert as a copywriter right now and figuring out a way to leverage the fact that 40% of millennials are opening their mail, which is insane to think about. 40% of people don't open their email. 40% of people don't click on ads. 40% of millennials open their mail right now, according to, I believe it was the New Yorker. But I'm sorry, maybe USA Today. I think that was the statistic that I found. So if you're using direct mail, if you can adequately write copy and find the right list for direct mail, you become extremely valuable to a client because now you have a captive audience for your copy that is extremely interested in already opening their mail. So consider it. Consider using direct mail and learning about it. There are lots of resources I can recommend if you need them. The last one is retargeting, website custom audiences, and behavioral segmentation. So when we talked about the 40-40-20 rule, one of the things I mentioned was hyper-segmentation. That was back when true hyper-segmentation didn't really exist. They could pick specific things like your zip code, your past buying behavior within 30, 60, or 90 days, 365 days, maybe what types of products you bought around, and they have kind of this profile of you. But it wasn't as detailed as nowadays where you can literally follow the exact same person around the web forever if you want to, just by using a pixel. So if they came to your website, or if they came to your client's website, or read one of your advertisements, you can have a specific piece of information that tells you that that specific person was interested in that specific piece of content. And then you follow them around the internet with that knowledge, marketing things to them. It's extremely powerful. Same thing with website custom audiences. That's what this is. So if you are marketing to something, to an audience who's been to your website, been to a specific page on your website or your client site, then you can put that into multiple different platforms, PPC platforms, PPV platforms, all that kind of stuff, and market heavily to them. And therefore, you achieve true hypersegmentation. You can also follow them from behavioral segmentation. If they clicked on an ad and they watched a video and they only watched 3 minutes of it, you can target them versus the people who clicked on the ad and watched 30 seconds of the video. You can track people based on their behavior, and it really, at this point, only is limited to your imagination and your PHP developers' knowledge of how to use pixels. So keep that in mind when you're working with clients, because if you have a clever idea of working with a client and say, we need to follow around this type of person for this reason, you can probably do that. So keep that in mind with the list. You have a lot more options nowadays with the 25% list rule. The second thing is the 25% offer. So an offer is still ridiculously important. It's just not 40% of the value. And here's why. You get more chances to make that offer than you used to be able to with direct mail. With direct mail, you had one chance. Nowadays, you can follow someone around with retargeting and incrementally offer them things based on their behavioral segmentation. So you don't have to offer them the big project or the big product or service at the front end and hope to God that 1% of them buy so that you can make your money back on this mail drop. That's not how it works anymore. You can pay $1 to send a click to a blog, and that blog means they're talking about a specific topic, and you can then retarget them for another $1 and follow them around for a $1 product that they can buy to learn a little bit more about their product, or your product or service, and on and on and on. I call it the tripwire economy. And you can see it not just in the internet, because it's not just a Ryan Dice term that he made up. This is the true tripwire economy in the sense of convenience stores, where gas stations don't just sell gas, they sell everything that you can think of for a little convenience, a little soda, a little chip bag, a little candy bar, whatever it happens to be. And you see some of those convenience items nowadays in many other stores. I went to the UPS store the other day and they were selling candy bars and chips. because it's a convenient thing. It is a tripwire purchase. It gets you into the buying mood. You can see it all over the place. Most stores, most retail stores do this on purpose. You see things at the checkout counter at Target or the grocery store for a reason. They are there for impulse purchases. Everything is wired for a tripwire economy. Why do you think they offer free samples in the grocery store? Because they want to make you hungry. They want you to start the tripwire economy. So think about that in your offers as well. Think about the microtransactions that you can take your buyer through, because you don't just need them to purchase your main thing. You can lead them down a path. Get them to make that buyer commitment, and you have a stronger offer. So the next thing is, people are more jaded and cynical because they're just exposed to so much advertising. However, one of the things that is true about this world now is that they are more entitled and expectant to the offers that are being made. They've seen a ton of offers, and so they expect the offer to sound and look a certain way. So if your product looks like that, then if your offer looks like that, then you don't have to jump through as many hoops. As long as they feel comfortable and safe with what they've already expected in the past, then you don't have to be as creative as you used to have to be, because people are just used to it. People are used to seeing what you can offer, and as long as they're interested, they're willing to put up with a little bit, because they're entitled and expectant of what they're about to get. And finally, with the 25% offer, plain and simple, there's just more things to model nowadays. There are more examples of the offer that you're trying to make for your product, and you can go and look and see what's working and what isn't. Most of the time you can see how well something is doing based on how many ads they're buying on the PPC networks, what their gravity score is on ClickBank, what the total sales volume is on their Shopify store, how many reviews they have on Amazon. There's more examples of products and offers that you can look at as to get a barometer or a litmus test of what's going on in your market and how to construct your offer. So use that data. It's out there. Use it. All right. Now, 25% copy and creative. This is important because this is increased from the 20%. It's not 40-40-20 anymore. It's 25-25, 25-25. Copy is more important, and here's why. Copy creates a point of differentiation. In this crowded marketplace, in this world that we have where advertising is ubiquitous, your copy, your ability to write compelling, persuasive copy is a single point of differentiation for your product. It doesn't necessarily come to the best product that wins. It comes to the people who market the best. And your copy now is more important to that than ever before. Apple is a wonderful example of how copy and creative can sell a product better than stats and power and raw betterness. Many of the Android phones out on the market now are technologically superior to Apple in almost every single way. Their processors are faster, their cameras are better, they have more storage, their battery life lasts longer, they can store more apps, their apps are faster, the App Store has more apps and more things to get into, it's easier to use, everything syncs up with Google and everybody uses Google. They're technologically superior, but Apple is winning the cell phone game, and Apple is winning the mobile game, simply because they've used this 25%, the copy and creative, to nail it and create a brand that people want to get behind, a story that people want to get behind. So use that value that you bring. And on top of that, understand that your value as a copywriter is never just the copy. You have to understand all four of these pieces. It's never just the copy. Because if you only understand the copy and you don't understand how to segment a list, you don't understand the difference between targeting people on Facebook versus Twitter versus Pinterest versus direct mail versus email, if you don't understand that, you will only ever be worth 25% of the value of the project, and honestly, probably a lot less. Now remember one rule of thumb. Everything is copywriting. So when you write these stories, when you write the stuff for the product, understand that this is what people see. When your prospect sees the marketing, they don't see the list selection, they don't see the offer until the very, very end. All they see is copy. That's it. Copy and creative. So even though it's 25% of how the marketing is structured and 25% of the value of the entire plan, keep in mind that you are on display. Your work is on display. And that has a huge amount of value, but also a huge amount of responsibility. So let's talk about the fourth part, which is technology. The last 25% of every modern marketing plan must be technology. Why? Well, we've got to go back to get delivered, get opened, and get read. The most important thing from the 40-40-20 rule back in the day before the internet is still the most important thing now. Get delivered, get opened, and get read. Get your emails delivered. There are wars going on with autoresponders right now because various autoresponders and various internet service providers and email service providers are battling to try and make sure that spam doesn't get through to their users. But marketing emails don't get prioritized as much either. So your emails that are getting sent out, are they even being delivered? Are they going to spam? Are they going to promotions? Are they going to social? Are they getting marked and sent into one of those software tools like Unroll.me that automatically puts an email into a newsletter for them to read? Is your stuff even getting delivered? You need to find out, because it's the same concept as if the postman doesn't deliver the letter to your prospect. There's no way he can even open it or read it if it doesn't even get delivered. Same thing with getting opened. Your prospect is inundated with advertising everywhere. And so it's part of your job as the copywriter to make sure that that email gets opened, that ad gets clicked, that video gets watched. Because until it gets opened or clicked or watched, they can't read it, they can't consume the message. And obviously, you also have to make sure that it gets read. You have to make sure that it's interesting and compelling enough to get read all the way through to carry them through the sales message. So, also, copywriters need to understand how the message is consumed. How the message is consumed depends on many different factors. What type of device the prospect is using when they receive your message. If you think that the video you made for your product is going to work the same on desktop as it works on an iPad or mobile, and if it works for the same type of viewer on desktop or iPad or mobile, you're kidding yourself. How many times have you watched a 45-minute VSL on your phone all the way through? You don't. I'll guarantee you don't, unless you're weird like me and you have nothing to do for 45 minutes but no computer near you. So most people will not watch that long of a message on their phone. Most people are using cellular data and don't want to stream data for that long to even consume the message, no matter how interested they are. Understand the context of how the message is consumed. That's just devices. You also have to think about where they're consuming it. Is it in their email? Is it in their work email or their personal email? Is it in their junk email? Is it in their social media newsfeed? Is it in their Twitter feed, their Facebook feed, their Pinterest feed? Any of that. Where is it? Where are they consuming this message? Because it does matter. You will often hear the term content is king. Content is king. Well, I'm not the first one to say this, but I will say it to you. If content is king, as in the right type of content is the king, then context is God. And here's why. You can have the best piece of content ever, the best video, the best blog, the best sales letter, the best ad, whatever it happens to be. But if it misses the context of your prospect, it won't even get seen. It will get ignored completely. So your content is only as good as the context it's being delivered in. So if you write a VSL and you expect people to watch it on their mobile phone, good luck. If you write something on Facebook that is specifically promoting a product that nobody is interested in yet, and you're not hitting that right market level of sophistication, sorry, you're done. All right, now let's talk about technology in the sense of newness. Technology changes all the time. Even older technology changes all the time. LinkedIn just rolled out a really cool new feature, at the time of this filming anyway, just rolled out a cool new feature where you can respond to certain questions using a video, and that video shows up very prominently in the LinkedIn newsfeed. Now, what that means is, for savvy people right now, they're answering a lot of questions via video, and their face is showing up everywhere on LinkedIn. New equals attention. Instagram, at the time of this recording, just changed just added a feature to where you can add a 10-second story similar to Snapchat and put stuff into that story and connect with your audience that way. New equals attention. Snapchat is rapidly growing because it has a new way to get attention. And attention right now in today's world is the first and hardest thing to get and to keep. So you should always be focusing on attention and how to keep people's attention, how to get it and how to keep it. So let's wrap up. Let's talk about this in the context of what we've discussed already in this course. What you see here, the 25x4 rule, the list, the offer, the copy, and the technology, directly corresponds to what you've learned with target market, primal desire, and awareness and sophistication. The list is your target market. Simply by understanding your target market isn't good enough. You have to be able to actually send the message to the right people and know how to do that. The offer is their primal desire combined with their core criteria and their primal fears. You have to know exactly what you're offering them and make sure it's lined up with what they really want. The copy is a combination of the market awareness and the market sophistication stage. Because if they're too aware or less aware, they're not going to respond to the copy just like you know how to do it. So when you're writing the copy, be aware of those two things, awareness and sophistication of your marketplace. The next component, which is what we just talked about, the technology, is where you, as a new modern copywriter, are going to make your next $1 million. And here's why. Most entrepreneurs, even digital entrepreneurs, do not have a grasp of every piece of technology that comes out and the way it can be applied to marketing. If you are the person who understands that technology and how to leverage it and how to use it persuasively, you will mint money. The reason being, it's a skill that you have to learn, just like copywriting. I call it the art of knowing tech. That's not knowing how to code. That's not knowing what GitHub is and how to use it. That's not knowing what Reddit is and how to use it. The art of knowing tech is, from a high level, understanding the purpose of tech and what it does and how to apply it to marketing. You don't have to be able to go into the weeds and tell me exactly what button color the Facebook ad manager submit button uses. That doesn't matter. But knowing that Instagram just put up 10-second stories just like Snapchat, and knowing that Snapchat had a rapidly growing user base that only used the 10-second stories, and knowing why that matters is valuable. And you can take that to your next client. That's all I have for today. Module 3, 25x4 rule. Go back through this if you need it. If you have any questions, bring them to the Q&A call. And other than that, have a great day.